Welcome to the Wildverse podcast, where we introduce you to the wild world of taxidermy, a place where artists and hunters collide. I'm Heather.
And I'm Ashley.
And today's episode is going to feature a very special guest. He's a world champion taxidermist, a successful businessman, an avid outdoorsman, and a true blue West by God Virginian.
He is a great supporter of our podcast, and we are super excited to feature him in this episode and have him tell us a bit about his story. We introduce you to Mr. Paul Kales. How are you doing, Paul?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yes, we are so happy to have you on.
Yeah, been waiting for it.
Yeah, we finally got you on. We finally were able to coordinate everything. I know, 3 busy people.
Yeah, it's not always the easiest.
So, Paul, we would love to start this episode off with the typical big question of, how did you ever get into taxidermy?
Well, I'd say it's a pretty common story, actually. I was kind of artistic growing up, and hunting, of course. So I went to college and was always fascinated by taxidermy whenever I could see the work or go to sports shows. But I went through 4 years of college, and I was sitting in a doctor's office one day, and I looked in this magazine, and in the back of it, this hunting magazine, there was a complete home taxidermy book. I think Jim Kelly. The guy's last name was Kelly, but I should have that book here, and I should have been prepared for that question. But that kind of started it. I ordered that book, and it just started out as a hobby. And, then you all of a sudden kind of say to yourself, yeah, I'm not too bad at that. And it just sort of snowballed after that. Just a pretty typical story. Started doing some work for people, working another job. And before long, I was doing it pretty much full time. I did it for several years. And right up to 97, I turned into a whitetail fanatic because I love, whitetail deer for obvious reasons, like everyone else, most people do, that turn into deer taxidermists. So that was my passion. Went from there and competed, going to the shows, just a sponge for it. I was young, probably, I don't know, right after college, probably 22, when I first started competing. And that would have been around 1989, I'm going to guess, 1990. Stayed in it. It was pretty much local market taxidermist through 97. 98, I kind of got burnt out, I think. Just, wasn't making the money that I wanted to make, wasn't getting the market that I did it kind of wrong to start out with. But then I went and got a job somewhere else, but we won the world championship in 97, and I thought that was going to be set it all on ablaze, and which I got plenty of deer to do, but it was in a very rural area. And back then, you didn't have the social media, et cetera, to really advertise other than the old school signs and newspaper ads, et cetera. But I got out of it. Just for multiple reasons. I got a job in pharmaceutical sales. I worked for an auto auction for a few years.
Okay.
And then things changed again. So 2006, I got back into it. I was full time, and I got some clients at that time that hunted all over the world. Got to do some polar bear, brown bear, just about every argali on the planet. There was 2 people kept me pretty busy for about 7 years.
Wow.
And so I got to do a lot of really interesting life-size work. We did it all. Ibex, Himalayan, you name it. It was just an amazing trophy room in this one client's house. But I started this curiosity of this lack of knowledge in tanning. But I'm kind of getting ahead of it. You had one basic question there. How did I get started in taxidermy?
Oh, yeah.
We'll
get to that one.
It was just, being a passionate whitetail hunter and being a little bit artistic and always an admiration of everybody's work.
You said it was kind of like a common story. I mean, that's kind of similar to how a lot of people got into it. So it's kind of a natural progression when you go from like hunting and being artistic. But I mean, obviously you took it pretty far too. So you mentioned, you won Best in World. Can you talk a little bit about when you won your first Best in World title?
That was in 1997. I was competing like crazy back then. State shows. I went to the national show. I think it was in 96. Kerry Cochran and the Buckeye Gang, they would come down and, being he was a native from West Virginia, so Ohio, Millersburg, Buckeye Mannequins, they came to our shows at West Virginia every year. They gave great seminars, and I was there in the front row seat. So competed at the '95 World Show. I didn't do any good, of course. '96 Nationals, and then the '97 World Show rolled around, and it was it was pretty amazing event. I mean, it's a pretty amazing feeling. It was
I bet.
back then. I always say it was before the wheel was invented, but we literally would stand on ladders and pour the catalyzed silicon mold. We would pour it from an extended height to eliminate air bubbles. We didn't have the vacuum degassing,
Huh.
or maybe they did, but I didn't have it. But no, not too many of us had it. So we were doing it old school. We had the frozen part sitting on it might have been some dehydrating unit in the middle of the room, and a little bit of vibration, pour the mold from a really high height, and that's how we did our mold pours.
Huh.
Oh, how
So
funny.
we were using fantastic cast. It was hard to get bubble-free cast, and the coloring would yellow on them, so anything that was pink turned orange. And it was, all I can say was I got awarded the best deer at that show. It was kind of a anticlimactic moment though, because they put the ribbons on the mounts before the banquet when people could go into the room first. So I'd competed. Gene Smith had won the '95 World Show, so we had competed against each other at state shows, etc. And so he was in that room. Tommy Hall, that was people that was competing back then. I was in line to go into the room to see how I did with the deer, and that's Tommy Hall and his wife came out of the room. They were exiting, and he reached out, and shook my hand. He goes, "Congratulations!" And I'm like, "What do you mean? We're going
Oh
into
no.
the room." And he goes, "You're the only deer in the room with a blue ribbon on." So by deductive logic, I knew I had won Best in World before the banquet. I was ecstatic,
Yeah.
but I was also a little bit. It took a little bit of the excitement out of the banquet. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
if you would ask me whether I'd take it, yeah, I'd take it every time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. I actually saw that basin too about, I don't know, 2 years ago, and I threw the whole deer in the dumpster one day. I just
Oh,
yeah,
your best in world deer.
yeah, it had there's it, it's one of those things that just sat around, gathered dust, and it was like people like, I want to see that deer. And I'm like, I don't want you to see that deer.
No, you don't.
Yeah, we all feel the same way. Once we compete, we're like, we know we can do better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was one of those scenarios where I would look at it for a good long several years, and I'm like, wow. I felt kind of fortunate that I won, but it was time for it to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was your first best in world title, and you won it again. You won best in world again, correct?
Won it again in 15. I finished third
Okay.
in '99. That was a kind of a unique arrangement there, but it was, I competed again in '99, finished third. 2015, I won again, but that was spent 3 months trying to make eyeballs and one day mounting the deer, and I dried it in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Force dried that deer in 3 days. Mounted it on Thursday, Friday morning, let it dry for 24 hours. Force dried it in front of a fan, had the real eardrums in it, put air splitters off the air compressor into the ears, and turned the heat on real high in that little bathroom I put it in. Just the true story. But I torched that deer dry in 3 days because I was just out of time. I hadn't slept in probably 2 full days, and it was just a train wreck. I almost didn't get to finish it, but the deer won, and it was just an extreme stress of that deer was by design. I thought, man, if I could just win, we were getting PRO-1, the chemical business, it was starting to catch hold pretty good. So I, I was working 2 full-time jobs at the time, and I was a full-time taxidermist. I was getting the chemicals started and really advancing my knowledge there. And so I'm like, I'll put it all together. If I could just win that world title with the deer, it might bring it'd be a positive thing for the business. So, and it has been. So shortly after that, quit doing taxidermy altogether. And I've been putting all of my efforts and research, and I'm a sponge for knowledge, very obsessive, compulsive about wanting to know every single thing I can so that I can standardize things. And I love what I do now. And Pro-1 Performance Chemicals, it rode the skirt tail of Pro-1 Taxidermy for a while.
Okay.
Uh,
But it was a good union.
oh, was that the name of your taxidermy business? Was Pro-1 Taxidermy?
That was not it in 97, but it was in 2015. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when I Googled your name, because I wanted to see like the World Show stuff and wanted to see what popped up when I searched Paul Kales. And I think a picture of you like sitting in your office, and it was called like Bucks, Bucks
Buck
something.
Ridge. Buck Ridge.
Yeah.
That was I changed the name from Buck Ridge. I got back into taxidermy in '06, and that's when around '08 when I started. We'll get into this part of the story. That's when the chemical thing started.
Okay.
And it was all because of 97 deer. And so I just got back into taxidermy in 2006. It was Buck Ridge Taxidermy. And I changed the name of it to Pro-1. I was getting some sheep clientele. I was going after that life-size work. And Buck Ridge didn't quite have the classy sound. So the Pro-1 came before when I was a taxidermist. It was strictly a taxidermy name to the shop starting out. But we just the next question I know is going to be, so how did the I'll let you guys
So
ask.
actually, what I kind of wanted to ask, just because we were talking about you in the World Show, I feel like you told me this, and I could be wrong, but you will be judging at the World Show this year. Is that correct?
Oh, I just saw that too. It's posted
Yeah.
as of
Yeah.
a couple days ago. You're judging.
I have, yes. Short answer to that is I will be judging the whitetails at the World Show this year.
What a pressure.
And I always refuse judging, but it's it's going to be a lot of pressure. I'm going to really miss being at the booth full time because I love being at the booth and talking to people. It's a lot of technical talk. But you know what? It's the World Show. It should be, might be. I still am not convinced it's going to be Larry's last show.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be. And with that being said, I was like, you know what? It was an honor to accept that. So I generally don't. I'm going to judge my home state show this year.
Okay.
Just because it's my home state show and it's only 40 minutes away from me. And it's a little bit of a prelim judging opportunity before the World Show to kind of get me acclimated back to the score sheets, etc.
Knock the dust off of you, get you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I generally like to stay in that nice little neutral area. Pro-1, I'm very blessed. A lot of people use my products, and I don't have to upset anybody by giving them a score on a score sheet that they might disagree with.
Valid point.
So I've always declined judging. That was one of the reasons. But the other reason is if I'm not at that booth, then I'm not, I get to talk a lot of technical, meet a lot of new people, and we can talk tanning and we can talk some taxidermy, because the good thing about me having a taxidermy background is I understand application. It's not simply a chemical knowledge. You get a blend of two, and that's perfect. That's perfect union.
Very true. Very true. So yeah, that leads me into the whole thing is, when did you think up the idea of creating Pro-1? And you kind of already touched on that. It would just kind of be cool. Like, how did you ever start learning about tanning and glues and all that?
I never dreamed in a million years that this is where I would go. I had a college degree, total different field, travel industry, park and resort management.
Oh, that's what your degree is in?
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I actually had a concentration in hotel motel management as well. It's travel industry. And
that is so random.
It was very random. It was more toward the park. There was a guy from the Federal Park Service. It was a bigwig in Washington, D.C., that bought my grandfather's old home place. And he would stop and visit my grandfather when I was going through like junior high. And that's where that started. His name was Bob Whitman, and we would talk about his job. And so that kind of got me into that thought. But anyway, long story short, got into taxidermy, how Pro-1 started, I was actually sitting at my desk one day looking at that 97 World Deer. And I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone, and it just jumped out at me. This was around 2007. That deer was mounted in 97. So 10 years later, it had yellowed a lot
Okay.
around the white muzzle, anything that was light colored hair, the throat patch, the muzzle. I could just see it from across the room. It just jumped out at me all at once, like a light bulb came on. It was just this yellowing. And I remember saying to him, like, wonder why that is. And there's got to be a reason for it. And the biggest thing that I was, not having knowledge is such a feeling that I can't tolerate. So when I was doing my own tanning, you'd have that one cape out of 10 that would get some hair curl or a little what we call hot spot, get loose hair. And, you'd call people to get instruction. And it didn't seem like I knew that much more after I got off the phone. And honestly, that's how I felt. I'm not shooting anything down, but I just didn't understand where I was going wrong or what should have been done right. And it was a frustrating feeling. I'm like, if I'm going to tan, I want to know how to do it. So I had a strong curiosity. And that deer that had yellowed, I started doing some research. And this is one of those moments where I'm going to be very transparent. There was a very popular tanning agent back then that everyone used. And a tanning agent that aldehyde tanning, a side effect is yellowing of the leather, not only on the skin side, but also on the hair side. So all at once a light bulb came on. I thought,
Okay.
there's got to be something out here. And I just became obsessively curious to start out with. So I started doing research, and I got lucky, and I called a particular chemical company within the global leather industry, and they provide the taxidermy industry the chemicals as well. And they just had a chemist that I hit it off with. And I was studying so much, and it was like I went back to college, but it was something that I enjoyed so much and never thought in a million years that's where I would be. But it all came from a lack of knowing and a desire to know. So, and I just didn't want to be like, when it first started out, I had like, the basic products, brush on tan, acid, degreaser, etc. But that's pretty good. Those are good shortcuts, but I really wanted to learn everything. I didn't know that much about submersible tanning, how tanneries did things. And I spent from that year right up until fairly recently, I still study a lot, but we went back to college on our own accord, so to speak, on the computer. The knowledge or the information is there. It's just, I put forth the effort and I stayed after it. And it wasn't something I went to college for, went to school for, to become a leather chemist. And I'm not a chemist by any nature, but I am very passionate about information. I like to be able to provide clear information, dot all the I's, cross all the T's. There's a reason that, you can standardize your process to get standardized results. And tanning is not rocket science. If anyone can learn how to make a rubber mold for a whitetail mouth cup, they can learn how to do any submersible tan there is. So it was just wanting to know and needing that. And what happened was, it's so funny. At the time, there was like one brush-on tanning product on the market,
Okay.
and that was Liquid Tan.
Okay.
This is around 2008, and I thought, well, there's an opportunity here. There's not that much. I'm going to provide some competition. Well, McKinsey, headquarters, not headquarters right then, but True Bond. We all came out with our product line the same year it was about, and I was like, that's just my luck. But it was all right. I remember Rick Morgan, the owner from Carolina Fur Dressing. First year I went to the Pennsylvania show. Last year they were at Altoona. He was there representing headquarters. And, I was nobody back then. No, but I was just getting started as Pro-1. His first show I'd been to, and he walked around, got my little brochure, and went back to his booth and sat down, crossed his legs, and started reading it. And that was in March, Pennsylvania Showtime. And by that fall, headquarters had their product line
Oh
with
no.
Rick Morgan. It was all good.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Uh,
can't help but be suspicious though, right?
yeah, it just created an idea. He was a very knowledgeable tanner with Carolina fur dressing. He's like, hey, there's an opportunity here as well. But the initial days, I didn't have the high paste until the following year. And that has been our signature product, as everyone knows.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But got real lucky with did some studying on some things. And then there was this one really unique fact that I dug up through my research. And it's what made that PRO-1 glue what it is. I didn't realize what I had my hands on at first. I actually threw my first mix in the dumpster one day, and I went and got it back out the next day and reblended it. I created this concoction, and it was kind of a globular mess. It was just like, this is not going to work. But then I started blending it again, so it
So throwing it in the dumpster wasn't like part of the whole plan. That was like
Part of the mix.
frustrating.
it was just like, this doesn't look too aesthetically pleasing. No one's going to want to use it. I can't even get it on the mannequin. It was just like chunks of cottage cheese.
Oh wow.
And but it needed another blend, and so that very next day, and I haven't changed one iota of that formula since then.
Huh.
But the chemicals, we really put all of our effort. We had the high pace, but we put all of our effort and research and into just growing my knowledge and learning everything I could about tanning. And so not knowing is not a feeling that I like to have. So I love what I do. And, there's so many ways of doing things. There's shortcuts, there's long cuts, but just understanding how to manipulate if you need to. But you've got to know as much as you can about the long cut in order to establish the shortcut.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
I just trying to provide a standardized systems with really good products. And, some of those products we have are blends that I've done, and they're working out really well. And more than anything, I think it's about the application. It's about the instructions, trying to provide clarity. It's hard to provide clarity. Some people are going to say, well, that's too much information. I want just simple, simple, simple. And so we have something like ProMax.
Okay.
Other people that want to learn how to do, how tanneries do it. And really, it's all pretty easy when it's done. It's like baking a meatloaf. I always tell people, if I'm going to bake a meatloaf, I'm going to read the recipe 3 times. And by the 4th time, I bet I can go in there and do it. So it's like that. Anything you learn that's new, whether it be learning to play a guitar or pour a mouth cup for a whitetail, it's all technical information that's kind of, you're ignorant to it to start out with, but once you do it a couple times, you become an expert at it.
Yeah.
Oh, what did you say? Something about, your Pro Max tan. I use your Pro Max tan. I don't do a lot of tanning, but I do like that one because it's simple. I'm not a super complicated. I'm not trying to,
Right.
be a tannery or anything. So I do like that. And I also was going to say your instructions that come like in your, what do you call that? Your,
Little flyer.
yeah, your fly, like your,
Really a catalog. And
yeah, like your instructions that come with the stuff. Anyway, that's super detailed, and I like that because I'm kind of the person who wants to see, as many details as possible. So I really appreciate how detailed and it's simple for me to follow. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And, but getting back to basic tanning, I mean, it's, knowing when to do the degreasing step, knowing all the opportunities of how to do degreasing. And, like 2 of the biggest misunderstandings in taxidermy tanning are, and I get so frustrated with this because I push as hard as I can to provide this information. And I'm just like, I want to everybody wake up this morning and log on to Facebook. PRO-1's going to do a single post for every single taxidermist in every state. And this is one thing I want everyone to know. If you salt a skin and you rehydrate it, whether it's wet salted or dry salted, you do not put salt in your rehydration water. It just slows the process down. And the biggest mistake in taxidermy is that people will salt a whitetail or any skin overnight, knock the salt off the next morning, rinse it at best, and go straight into the pickle.
Which is salted as well.
Well, the pickle has a pound of salt in it for a reason. But whenever you take a hide that you have had salted, if you don't rehydrate it and get it completely pliable again, basically green skin limp, raw skin limp like it was before you salted it. If you don't have that skin completely limp and pliable, it's going to go into that pickle dehydrated. And I use this analogy as like the blood flowing through the veins in your body. When we salt that skin, we pull the moisture out, and that fiber structure is an open channel and it collapses. And even on an overnight salting, people think because skins are wet salted that they don't need any hydration, but they are fairly significantly dehydrated even on an overnight salting. So the way a pickle works is through osmosis. That water that carries that acid needs to be able to flow through that channel in that skin, like the blood does through your veins. It tries to reach a state of equilibrium. Everything in the pickle, everything's in the skin will become an equal inside, outside the skin. If you don't have that channel opened up for that water to carry, the acid gets carried by the water. If we don't open that fiber back up through hydration, it's going to go into that pickle restricted, and that pickle's going to really fight to get into that fiber, into the deepest part, which is where the hair root is. So bottom line is, some people have, they'll say a skin needs to be thirsty before it goes into the pickle to absorb the pickle. Well, that's totally incorrect. It needs to be full of water again for osmosis to work correctly. It's just a method of transport. It has to be able to receive that water. And for that to happen, that fiber structure has to be open, just like the veins that carries your blood. So dehydrated skins going into the pickle will leave rawness in the skin. You're not going to get a uniform pickle. You're not going to get a uniform tan. And all the pickle does is lower the pH of the skin so that it can receive the tan. That's all the pickle does. And back to your question, Ashley, you mentioned the point. There's salt in a pickle, and it's generally around 1 pound of salt per gallon. Acid is a magnet for water. And if we didn't have salt in that pickle, the skin would draw too much water in from the acidic pH, and it would overswell with water as it became pickled, so to speak, acidic. And you have to have that amount of salt in there to keep it from overswelling. So it's kind of a buffer. It's a little bit of a dehydrator, but we can't use too much salt in the pickle, or you'll get the same effect in the pickle. You'll shut the fiber down in the pickle just as you would salting it on the table. So that 1 pound of salt per gallon of pickle is by design. It keeps the skin from overswelling as it's being pickled.
So then that's where you would get the quote acid swell.
Acid swell could happen, for instance, if you was going to degrease something that has any skin that has been pickled, and even tan skins, if you soak them too long, they can swell with water because they're finished at a pH of a 4.0 and it's still acidic. But when we're talking about acidic skins or pickled skins, we're talking about very low pHs. So, and due that skin is a magnet for water, as acid is a magnet for water because it's such a low pH. If we're going to degrease a black bear and you put it in plain water, if you didn't have a little bit of salt in there, like some people don't, our instructions now have baking soda, so it'll offset that potential because it's an alkali. But if you didn't have some minimal amount of salt, and that number is 1/4 pound per gallon, 1/4 pound per gallon will block a skin's propensity to overswell from the acid. So if we took a pickled skin and you just soaked it in plain water, trying to degrease it with some degreaser, it could blow up, and it wouldn't take long. It would overswell with water and rubberize. And that's why we use a little bit of salt. Like when degreasing takes place after we pickle the skin, then we shave the skin, then we degrease. And that is a pickled skin that is at risk of acid swell. So that's why we use salt in the degreasing, because we're dealing with a pickled skin. It's going into a soak, an extended soak, and we have to have a little bit of salt in there. So 1/4 pound to 1/2 pound per gallon. That's maybe too much information, but all these formulas are on our website, by the way, under tanning instructions. There's a lot of things that are mostly pH related when it comes to tanning.
Yeah, like I said, your instructions are very clear. Like they're very easy to follow and they're very detailed. So like you said, all that information is there. But it's interesting that you said so your initial thing was if you salt a hide, don't add salt.
Well, yeah, if you have
Okay.
let's say you have a dry salted skin.
Yes, completely dry.
If it's a dry salted skin, like it was going to be shipped to a tannery dry salted or stored in a box, that skin for a whitetail, it needs to be over. You'd have to rehydrate it all night long. We're talking about 16 to 24 hours for most common skins if they're dry salted. You wouldn't want to put salt in your rehydration to start out with. It's plain water with a good rehydrator. Our rehydrator is Adazon. Our degreaser is a good rehydrator as well. It's a multi-purpose surfactant-based degreaser. That degreaser can be a rehydrator for salt-dried skins. It can be a soap agent for washing skins. It can be a degreasing agent. The Adazon we have is our main primary relaxing, rehydrating agent that we use. Has a little bit of a bacterial control function. So, quick summary of a rehydration for a dry salted skin is per 5 gallons of cold water, 2 fluid ounces of a good rehydrator. So we add no salt because the process during rehydration is we are trying to introduce salt-free water to a water-free skin. And if you put salt in your water to start out with, you are slowing that exchange down. We're trying to put water in, take salt out. Water goes in, salt comes out. So if we add salt to the water, we slow that exchange down right off the bat. There's no value to adding one. And the common thing that you will see is people will tell people a half a pound of salt per gallon of water to rehydrate a dry salted skin. No, you're already loading that water up with about 1/4 of the amount of salt it will hold. And you've just slowed down the rehydration. So we want to rehydrate it as quick as possible because as water temperature rises, bacteria reactivates. And the number is exactly 63 degrees and warmer. So once that water temperature exceeds 60 degrees, you start running a lot more risk with bacteria reactivation during that soak. So we're trying to get that skin pliable again, opened up, filled back with water before we can get it into the pickle. We don't want to put a skin into the pickle dehydrated. We have to have it fully rehydrated, meaning full of water again, before it goes into the pickle. We don't want to put salt in a rehydration for dry salted skin. It just slows it all down. And because it slows it down, it gives it more time for that water temperature to raise. So we're talking about an overnight rehydration. That's not enough time. Your water temperature is going to come up, but it's not enough time for bacteria to really be an issue on a 16 to 24 hour rehydration for dry salted skins, most common skins. When you start talking about African skins and thick skins like nilgai or waterbuck, things like that, those dry salted skins may need at least 2 full days. And what we do is we just go to a fresh rehydration the next morning because then we speed the process back up. Fresh water with no salt in it. As during an overnight rehydration the next morning, that water will have probably about a 1/4 pound of salt per gallon in it. That's what's coming out of the skin. So if you were to drop a salinometer in a rehydration after an overnight soak of a dry salted skin, you would see it would probably read around 10%. That's a 1/4 pound of salt per gallon. So that water's going in, salt's coming out, and we can speed it back up for skins that need 2 days of rehydration by just going to a fresh rehydration. Just go to another brand new rehydration. 2 things. We have salt-free water, and we also have cold water. So the water temperature came up on the first rehydration. By the next morning, we go to a fresh rehydration, it's going to be cold water. So we're slowing that bacteria down again. And we're getting that salt, we're getting that water in at the fastest rate possible because it's a brand new, fresh, salt-free rehydration soak.
Dang, that's a lot of good information right there. I'm like, I need to re-listen to this a couple times to probably soak that all in.
Yeah, let me add some clarity to it for everybody. I'll make it real simple. On PRO-1's website, tanning instructions, click on it, drop down menu, go to the page that says rehydrating, deodorizing, pickling, degreasing. And like one of the biggest questions I get is, when do you do the degreasing? At the top of each of those pages is the general tanning sequence: salt, rehydrate, and then you can wash. And then we're going to pickle, shave, degrease, repickle, and then you get a tan based upon your choice. Unless you're doing an all-in-one tan like the Pro Max. That's a little bit different, but it's very much very close cousin to a pickle.
Wow. Yeah, I think, I mean, like I said earlier, I try to keep it simple. So that's kind of a little bit out of my knowledge base at the moment, but that is super good information. And like you said, you want to know everything about it so then you can shortcut stuff, right? That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'd like to know all that stuff and then do the simplest version of that. So that's my idea.
Yeah, that's probably the two biggest mistakes in taxidermy tanning are the people that salt overnight and throw them straight in the pickle. Skins are dehydrated. They're not going to open up where they need to be to get fully pickled. And then using salt in the rehydration is probably the second biggest mistake.
Okay, so that's good two takeaways there. And I didn't even know that. I guess it makes so much sense that you explained it, but I didn't realize that like you wanted that hide to be more hydrated then, because you think like a dehydrated, like thirsty tan,
Right?
you put that in the pickle, it's going to absorb all that. But you're totally, the way you explained it totally makes sense where it needs that transfer system in order to even be pushed into that, right? So
Yes. It has to be full of water for that flow to happen. And that fiber structure has to be wide open. The only way it's wide open is to be full of water.
yeah, great explanation though. Thank you for that. That's yeah, totally a light bulb. It wasn't off in my head.
Just standardizing things, It's pretty basic.
Well, when you put it the way you do it, yeah, I guess you could say it's basic, but if
Yeah,
unless you I guess unless until you hear it said like that, you're like, "Oh, well, that makes so much sense." But then
right.
prior to your explanation, it's like kind of a mystery putting the
Yeah,
pieces together.
it's like, I have a side by side, as everyone knows. And like one of my friends who's a taxidermist, he'll call me for tanning, but then I'm like, it's kind of easy. Listen to what I'm saying. And he's like, it is for you. I get it. But then when he goes talking about primary clutches and secondary clutches and how they work with a CVT drive and a belt drive and the helix and magnets and all these things and his clutch system for this side by side. Well, guess what? I don't know how to do that. He's good at it. But I also tell him, like, you know what? You need to give me the same kind of details. Don't leave anything out, because he'll kind of hit on the high points. And yeah, I could use some examples, but I like to, when somebody doesn't have the knowledge, you can't just like say hit two high points and leave these important parts out in the middle, because it's going to cause a problem.
I like the Pro Max tan because I am like, I don't want to put too much energy
Yeah,
into the very few things that I tan a year, and it's perfect for that. So I like it.
right. And I always tell people, you can be a full-time tanner, you can be a full-time taxidermist, but if you got a lot of taxidermy work, it's hard to do all of that tanning.
Yeah.
Pick and choose. Just like taxidermy, you don't have to do it all. I, I don't know if
Yeah, good point.
you probably don't take in turkeys and rattlesnakes, do you?
No, I'm a mammals
There you go. You're
exclusively.
specializing.
Yes. This episode of Wildverse is sponsored by PRO-1 Performance Chemicals. PRO-1 specializes in tanning chemicals for the professional taxidermist. They offer a complete line of tanning products to provide you with everything you need to tan your next hide. I really like their Pro Max Tan for my personal tanning projects. They make it so simple, it's easy to follow instructions printed right on the bottle. I actually used Pro-1 to tan the deer that I won with at Nationals, and I was using this same tan to tan some bobcats last week. It's super versatile. Not only does Pro-1 have you covered for all your tanning needs, they also sell Pro-1 Hide Paste, the industry standard in glue. Heather and I both use Pro-1 Hide Paste on every single mount. We love it. It has a thick consistency that makes it easy to apply to the form, yet it's soft and pliable enough that it can be easily manipulated under the skin after you throw the hide on. If you haven't tried Pro-1 Hide Paste, I am telling you, you are missing out. And now, as of 2024, you can order Pro-1 products directly online at pro1performancechemicals.com. That's PRO, the number 1, performancechemicals.com.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about like rehydrating, putting it into the pickle and degreasing and all the steps. Have you ever heard of people thawing animals, like whole frozen animals in pickles? Like, with you and your knowledge, what do you think about that?
You know what? I know a lot of people do that. And first well-known person I know that does that is like Brian Hendricks
Okay.
with, with from McKinsey fame there and a little bit of Pro-1 fame. All right. So hi, Brian. He used Pro-1 glue on his mounts at the last World Show. I'm just going to throw that in. You might end up editing. But no, he won a couple jackets from me from that. So we gave those World Show winners jackets last year.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And, so those were cool. But yeah, I know a lot of people do it. And when people ask me that, I think of him because I know I've read some tutorial that he does that. And you know what? It's just another one of those things. Like I say, there's lots of ways of doing things. I think there's a certain risk once a hide has been, bacteria needs three things: moisture, heat, and time. And it's kind of along the. I'm not saying that I say you shouldn't by any means because a lot of people do it. I'm not as against that because it's going to be a fairly short process before it's skinnable. The pressure washing thing, I am a little bit more. I try to steer people. Like I know a lot of people do that as far as rough fleshing. But what happens after that is you got a soaking wet hide. And even though you salt it on the skin side, I think there's still risk on the hair side. It takes a good amount of time for that salt to pull enough moisture out of that hide to render it to the point that bacteria is no longer a risk. So anytime someone tells me they're pressure washing in order to rough flesh a hide, I'll tell them I would prefer they put them into a salt brine, which is 2.5 pounds of salt technically per gallon of cold water. And we always tell people, one of those Lowe's paint cup quarts, one of those kind of full, not heaping full, but actually the 28-ounce mark is 2.5 pounds. But I tell them just one of those quarts per each 1 gallon of cold water. That's all you need to do a brine. So we're talking about a whitetail cape, 3 gallons of cold water, 3 quarts of salt. And that is 100% brine. It's not a pound of salt per gallon. It's at least 2.5 pounds of salt per gallon. That's 100% brine. And that quart is about 3 pounds. You're not going to mix it all up. It's all the salt that the water will hold and then some. So if you put a hide that you have soaking wet into a salt brine, you get the exact same function of salting it on the table. Traditional salt, dry salt application to a green skin, you can introduce salt to that skin in an equal manner by soaking it in a 100% salt brine. It's just done in solution. So you surround the hair side, the skin side when you submerge it in a brine. Whereas if you take a pressure washed fleshed green cape and you salted it, if you got it in a salt box and you got plenty of salt underneath, it's not as much of a risk. I'm just kind of OCD on all of those little tiny risks that I think, you can eliminate them. I don't like the idea of the wet hide. If you're going to pressure wash them, if you're going to introduce salt to it, put it in a brine. Now, if it's a raw skin that you've just beamed out and fleshed traditionally and you want to salt it in a salt box or whatever, then do traditional salting. But thawing those carcasses out in pickles, it works. As long as people don't spend too much time, because eventually, I think the more the risk comes after you've gotten it out of the pickle. And you're going to skin the animal out, but then it's still going to be wet. The acid's going to start to become stale. It doesn't have the same strength. And it's just becoming diluted, so to speak, after you've drained it out of the pickle. But as long as you do things in a timely manner, hey, people do it. It's one of those things where I just never did. But I'm not saying it's incorrect in any way.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know I had a horse that I skinned out that I only had it was the whole hide and then the head was still in it. And I was really scared because when I skinned it out, it was hot, and I put it in the freezer right away. And then when I thawed it to skin the head out, I tried the whole pickle thing, and I still didn't flesh it because it's a lot to flesh. So I put it back in the freezer, but I've just been scared because it's so wet, and
Right.
I know people do it, but it still, I'm afraid it's going to slip when I go to beam it.
Yeah, there's some risk. Moisture is a risk, and that's why I'm not a fan of pressure washing or any solution soaks to thaw animals. I mean, carcasses. I just think it's a risk. But you know, there's lots of ways of doing things, and until that hair gets loose,
Yeah.
you can take acid and put it in water. Like everybody uses the safety acids, a half fluid ounce per gallon. You can do the deductive logic on that and take it down. If you got a quart spray bottle, you can just put some acid in water, and you can make yourself a instant kill bactericide to spray inside the ears of foxes while you're skinning the carcasses. If you're afraid of bacteria, now that's moisture, but it's a different type of moisture. Like if we're not talking about a skin you thawed in a pickle, maybe we're just talking about a conventional thaw, and you're worried about a fox, hair slip in the ears. When you're dealing with fresh skins, you don't really have a lot of risk. It takes a lot more time for bacteria to cause a problem than what most people know. But when you're dealing with skins that you don't know about, I mean, who knows what kind of field care, heat, etc. And so the bottom line is get them off the carcass as soon as possible. And then, hey, look, if you're worried that it's green and it's a little bit smelly, hey, get that thing split and turn the best you can. Throw it in a pickle and forget the salting step. Just get it straight into the pickle. That's where it's no bacteria. There's no risk in that pickle. So you can save an iffy skin by throwing it raw straight in the pickle.
That's nice to know.
It's probably the safest place for it to be. We have that brine, that old 1900 formula where it's called a tan liquor, where it's actually an alum brine.
Okay.
It's like 5 gallons. Now, this is too much information. This is one of those things. But back in the 1900s, this was their go-to. They could store hides in this solution for 30 years. For these museums could get these skins out 30 years later.
Wow.
And it was 100% salt brine with alum in it. And per 5 gallons of water, 5 quarts of salt, and 1 quart, which is 2 pounds, of aluminum sulfate. And they could store a hide in that mixture, in that solution, for 30 years. Now, that's a really good, if you got a really bad, iffy skin that you feel is green and it's slimy and it's ready to slip, that's probably the one formula that I would recommend is you get it split quick and you get the big chunks of red meat and fat off only, but you make all this happen fast. And then you throw it in that alum brine for probably at least 3 days. And then, any pick or anything like that's like a 3 to 5 day range. So you put it in that alum brine and it will lock hair. If there's any chance of saving an iffy skin, it's that magic solution. 5 gallons, this is on a post we put on our Facebook, PRO-1 Performance Chemicals. It's probably last year sometime, but it's the best chance of saving an iffy skin. And you can keep that brine sitting around. You can reuse it over and over and over because it's saturated with salt. It's 100% brine. 5 gallons cold water, 5 quarts of salt, 1 quart of alum. That is a magic save for the iffiest skin on the planet. Alum has a really strong hair setting effect. And then what you would do is after 3 days or minimum in that solution, just get it out. I would probably leave it in there 5 days, but get it out and just put it in plain cold water and relax it until it's completely pliable, and then go into a traditional pickle.
And it turns out okay?
It'll lock hair better than any other formula. If you have something that you need that you're scared is going to get loose, like that horse, you get that head skin out, you split and turn it and be as quick as possible. And if you throw it in that alum brine, it'll do its job. If anything will save it, that'll save it.
Wow.
There's an excerpt that I found, a historical excerpt on tanning. And I actually put that excerpt where you could go find that information on that Facebook post. I'm pretty sure I did. So it talks about where it came from and how they used that. That they would go to Africa and dig these pits in the ground, and they would put a hide down in this pit to sort of act like I don't know, like a liner in the bottom of a swimming pool, and they would fill that pit up with this solution, and they put all these skins in there because they didn't have freezers, salt. They could, but if they wanted to preserve them in a more lasting manner, they would put this alum brine to these skins or soak them in this alum brine. And that was the go-to solution back for tanning back in like 1900, probably late 1800s, probably earlier than that. But it had a long history. There's side effects to alum. The big problem they had was they couldn't get the skins degreased. When you leave grease in a skin, that's what causes grease burn. And you ever seen these skins that tear like wet toilet paper after they're tanned? And they just push your finger right through them. It's from the grease that is hardened within the skin and it oxidizes and it just breaks down the skin. The skin won't pickle, doesn't tan. It's almost like a surface cure if they salted it in Africa or anywhere else, but they didn't get the core dried out. And where that grease is in these skins, like leopards, different skins like that, these cats are prone to it. It's mainly a grease burn issue when you see those skins that just tear apart. It's from the fat that sort of it creates a heat whenever it's just the temperature just raises inside that core from that fat, that grease that's left in there, and it's not dried out. So it gets hotter in that core, and it really breaks down the skin as that fat hardens and oxidizes.
Okay. I know we dealt with a leopard that was it was like wet tissue paper, wet toilet paper. Like it was, the
Right.
whole tail was like just pieces and yeah.
Yeah, it's not getting that skin cured out properly. It's staying damp on the inside where the grease is at, and the grease is creating a temperature.
So this is kind of moving on from talking about tanning. We learned a whole lot of really good stuff as far as that goes. And you were mentioning about how your glue has been like obviously super popular. I know I like using it. Most everybody else does. And you told this story at the PA show a few weeks ago. And I didn't tell Ashley this story, but I found it pretty comical and I wanted to see if you could tell Ashley it. I'm going to kind of preface it with this. Your glue has a lot of different uses, and I know that I, for one, I use it in like small ears, habitat, attaching leather to the back of pedestals. But what is the strangest thing someone has ever wanted to use your glue for? Yeah, you know what story it is.
Okay. All right, so I'm glad this customer that called me was not from West Virginia. They were actually from Pennsylvania.
Oh, sorry.
I was driving, and my wife was riding with me, and I got a phone call, and I think I might have been on Bluetooth at the time. It wasn't on the truck phone speaker. So at any rate, this person, they asked me, they started the conversation out. They said, I called a taxidermist and they referred me to you, and they were fairly intelligent sounding. And like, I have this cat and the leg has broke off of it, fallen off of it. And they told me you had a really good glue, and that I said, so you need to glue the leg back on this cat? And they're like, yes. And I said, so this is a mounted cat that you've had, it fell off in the floor or something? They said, no. And I said, so you have a freeze-dried cat. You have a freeze-dried cat that the leg broke. And he says, no. So immediately I hit the speakerphone on my truck. And I said, so he's like, well, the cat has been dead for X amount of years. It was like 11 years. To be honest with you, I became a little bit shell shocked at that moment. And when I get that way, it's kind of hard for me to remember. I kind of get like stuck in the moment, and I just like it like zooms right over me. But so I kind of felt something was really wrong with this. And this person sounded pretty intelligent, and my cat's leg fell off. And then when he said, no, it's not mounted, it's not freeze dried, I'm like, so he said, well, it's been dead for about 11 years or so. It was a pretty lengthy time. He said, the tail came off of it first. Now this leg's fallen off. and it smelled a little bit at first, and it's on a pillow at the bottom of my bed. And I said, "So let me get this right. You have a dead cat that's not been mounted, freeze dried, or preserved in any way." And he said, that's when he said, "Well, it smelled a little bit at first." But but as soon as I said that, he answered, "It smelled a little bit at first." Then his next words out of his mouth was, "I've got another call I need to make. I'll get back to you." Because he knew that I'd already tuned in. This is crazy. You're crazy. I was like, "Is your mom sitting in the living room rocking in the rocker? And how long has she been there? And what's falling off of her?" But this was, I thought it was a gag at first. It might be a gag. Then I realized, and to this day, somebody might call me one day and say, "We got you good," but it's been a little time. But yeah, his cat died. He put it on a pillow at the bottom of his bed. He would brush it, etc. I don't know how it dried out enough that it didn't turn into a gooey, gobby, rotten mess in this house.
Maybe he had it sitting in front of his wood stove or something and it dried it out.
Maybe fan dried it and torched it dry. But yeah, that was the weirdest call I ever got. That was a wild one. It actually spooked me a little bit. I actually wanted to get off the phone because I'm like, he's going to get offended that I've rolled this all these facts out, and he's going to find me. He's going to come to my address.
Yeah, because that kind of individual who would do something like that might be a little questionable
Yeah,
to
that's
begin with.
not normal by any stretch of the imagination. Not normal. But that was the most unique call I ever got.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know where you were going with that. I I was like, oh,
A dead
I thought you meant it was like a live cat. Like somehow it got caught in like a fan belt or something, got its leg tore off. He's trying to get the leg put back on,
yeah,
but that's even a little weirder, maybe.
yeah, yeah, that was crazy.
Well, and so I guess he never called you back.
I don't think so. If he did, he did it under incognito. It was not, didn't reveal it again. But I wanted to like, I would have loved to have walked up on the stage at the banquet set, or anybody came by the booth was like, "Which one of you in this room turned this person on the Pro-1?" Because I know this story. There's a taxidermist in Pennsylvania that knows this story.
Yeah, I feel like this guy called somebody and they're like, I'm just going to pawn this one off on Paul. So call this guy.
That is what it sounds like. No, I have just the guy for you.
That's exactly what happened.
Oh, dang. Uh,
Yeah, you feel the same way.
I know. I'm a little speechless. Like, I don't know what to say about that.
Oh, it's a weird story. That's why you had to tell Ashley, because I was like, I felt the same way as you did, Ashley. I'm like, where is this going? Is the cat alive? Like, what? And then I had to have you retell that story because that was
Yeah, what's the possible outcome?
I really wish that he would have carried on with it and we could have shipped him the glue. Maybe I could have had a success story to put on Facebook at least, maybe the website, depending on how it looked.
Yeah, it would have been a good experiment, I suppose. At least, like, hey, use it for all types
Yeah.
of skin in any
rotten.
stage. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Let's moving on from taxidermy and business world for a little. We know you're very passionate about the outdoors. So if you had to pick one species of animal to hunt for the rest of your life, what would you choose? What's your go-to game?
Most people probably think I would say a white-tailed deer,
I would assume that, yeah.
but there's just something about a bull elk in the wilderness, that experience, whether you're in the Rockies in Colorado or somewhere else, it just there's when it's happening, you don't get a lot of elk vocalization in Colorado. There's so many hunters, and now there's going to be so many wolves. But when they're bugling, man, there's nothing that comes close to it. It's just incomparable. And I've spent a lot of time, and like last fall, I hunted. I'm ashamed to say how much time I put in the saddle and et cetera, hunting this one buck. And it just gets to be almost unhealthy. It kind of feels that way.
Yeah.
But I'm hunting pretty mountainous area in the southern part of West Virginia, and there were 6 days in a row, or 11 days in a row. I'm sorry, that I hiked 6 miles round trip. It gets to the point where it's just not that much fun. But everything about elk hunting for the whole month of September, even it's just like if you're looking at the stars on one of those full moon nights in the Rockies, and there you don't hear maybe an airplane, but that cell phone can't ring. I
Oh
love
yeah.
it. I would. I just said it recently. Funny you asked that question. If I had to choose between elk and whitetail, I would take an elk.
Yeah.
And I'm a trophy hunter, so I'm always on a big buck every year. I rarely ever get one killed, but I've always got pictures of 160s, and what was a 164 8 pointer this year. And yeah, I would take elk. I love elk hunting. Love elk hunting. I'm ready for elk season right now.
My question, I guess, then is like, does West Virginia have elk, or is it like a limited herd?
They've introduced elk. We have
Yeah.
elk
Okay.
state that they brought in, and in years, I don't know how long it'll take, but they'll eventually have a season like Virginia or Pennsylvania and Kentucky. States come to mind, but yeah, they brought in, and I'm not up to speed on how many it was, but they've brought in elk, I think, two different times now. Um, like the Tomlin Wildlife Management Area down south of Charleston, which is our capital, between Charleston, West Virginia, and Pikeville, Kentucky. That corridor G highway that runs through there, that's where that elk herd was introduced.
Okay. Yeah. No, I would agree with you with elk. I've never hunted elk, but that's like my bucket list animal. Especially like you said, I mean, I at least just got to spend some time in the Rockies, and like you had mentioned, we saw planes all day long, but your cell phone's not on. We dreaded coming out of the mountains and your phone's gonna ring, and it's just beautiful. And elk are just so cool. I don't know what it is about them, but they're just cool.
They're just big, and when the bugling,
Yeah.
it's and you know I didn't get, and I'm a lot better at bugling now than I was, but it took me a while to learn how to use that diaphragm and be able to do a real bugle, and all of a sudden when it clicked, it clicked. So it's a lot of fun to do that. It's not quite as boring as it's kind of like turkey hunting.
That's what I've heard.
I was about to say that. Yeah, you're talking to them and you're bringing them to you. I think that's just it's a different kind of hunt.
You get to engage it a little more depending on the mood of where if the animals are vocalizing or how many hunters are in the area. I mean, I'm very envious of people that live in Wyoming or New Mexico that are residents that get to go hunt those elk, because I'm an archery hunter only, and so it's all about September. And Colorado is a lot more difficult.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Like they have a huge elk population, but it's just
Yeah.
yeah, it's just not as so many more people hunting them, and it's all like public and
Yeah. You can't out hike people. Nowadays everybody's got Onyx, everybody's e-scouting. I mean, you just can't find that pocket. You're like, oh man, I'm looking at this and it's isolated, and there'll be two other people there that did the same thing.
Had the same idea.
Right.
So it would be elk. I've been elk hunting a few times and never successfully, but like I've done it and stuff in the Rockies, and it is like a very magical kind of experience and something that's completely different than any kind of other hunting that I've done.
By far my favorite.
yeah. And honestly, like if I would do it, I'd want to do it archery too, because I know just here in Pennsylvania when we go to see our elk, when you're in close range and they bugle, it is a completely different thing than like if you hear them up in the mountains, you'll hear them coming down off the ridges, but when you're 50-60 yards from them and you hear that air like starting to come up, and it's just so cool.
Yeah. They chuckle and grunt. I mean, there's just so much vocalization and learning. I mean, that's just it's like anything else that you become passionate about. There's a learning curve, and it's just gaining knowledge, and it's a fun, just being able to accomplish anything you can. To kill one with a bow is just amazing. I've yet, I've yet to do that.
So, so you do it. So I messaged your wife Elsie because I wanted to get some good like things to ask you, and she was saying about how they make fun of you all the time for all the bucks that you chase but never get. So that that holds true for elk.
Well, she killed an elk 2 years ago.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, we were back in the wilderness probably about 6 miles. Well, actually, we packed first day we packed out half of it, like 5 miles,
Wow.
and then we went in on another trailhead the second day, Thought it would be easier. It was longer. Didn't turn out to be that much easier, but it was an 8 mile pack out with like 70-pound packs on the second day. So
It's a lot of work.
elk hunting is tough, but it's just amazing feeling of accomplishment to be able to do it. You know.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So, when I asked her about, some interesting stuff about you that maybe not everybody knows, the one is about how you used to have hounds for hunting bears. And I can't imagine that that was easy in the West Virginia mountains either.
No, and when I was a taxidermist, and I will honestly say, and Leland, don't hold this against me, but I was like, you know what, hound hunting or bear hunting with hounds, that's not that much of a sport. I thought in my ignorant days, I thought that. And then oh, I'll mount your bear, but I just don't understand. I mean, dogs treat the bear, you go in, shoot them out of the tree. It's not a big a deal. But then I got 3 dogs and I got bit by that bug. And it was like, now I understand how the lady that owned Secretariat felt. You know, it's like these animals become machines and you only make them machines. The really good ones is they got to be born with it to a degree, but it's what you as a hunter, you keep them out there and you can't just keep them tied up and go turn them loose during kill season or hunting season. So I was, I'm a very passionate person. I like to do things to as far as I can take them. So I spent a lot of time with those dogs, and it was a very hard sport. There was a lot of nights I didn't get back until after daylight the next morning. I would go to work the next day when I worked for an auto auction, and I'm driving 350 miles a day in sales, traveling all over the country. I'd have no sleep. I'd be pulling over the side of the road, getting 15 minutes of sleep
Wow.
and cat naps. But man, when you had those dogs finished and they're up on the box and you're rigging that lead dog and you watch him in your rearview mirror for years and he turned, I mean, it was just a passionate thing. It's like watching where the red fern grows now it's on steroid level, it's like, that relationship you have, if you're an animal lover, first of all, but then, bear hunting was really hard sport. It really was. I mean, you're fortunate if your dogs don't get hurt, and that's a very realistic, sad part of bear hunting is they not only get hurt, they get killed sometimes. And but that's an assumed risk. And I'm a big dog lover, so that wasn't a good part of it, But I try not to, and they're not pets. I had some of them I were more fond of than others, but I tried not to turn them into pets. They
Yeah.
were they were a hunting machine. That's what I wanted them to be.
Say, what type of dogs did you run?
Well, I had mostly English red ticks when I was doing it, and I did it from like 1999 through 2006. And my job changed, and I just didn't have the time to do it anymore. Everything changed, and I had probably at one time I had like 9 dogs at a time. I probably had 5 that I considered finished, and I never lost a dog personally during that time. There was other people that I hunted with that had dogs that got killed by bear. I had some dogs that were hooked. Bears would fight on the ground, not tree. It was usually a smaller bear that was the most dangerous because they're really fast.
Okay.
They decide to be that bear and sit on the ground and fight a dog, and they'll lunge at a dog and hook them, and it yanks the hide away from the muscle, and then it immediately starts getting infected. And you go get
Mm.
drain plugs put in. But I had, I've rescued some dogs here recently from the areas where we bow hunt at, and people dropped these hounds that for whatever reason didn't turn into what they needed them to be. And we had a female dog that we brought back last Memorial Day, I think it was. Anyway, I could tell she was going to be something special. She was wired is the word I would use. And we found a bear hunter took her. And she within a short amount of time, she turned in to be better than his finished dogs. But
Wow.
she was inexperienced, and she got into a bear first one day, and this bear trapped her in a treetop and killed her. And bear hunting is with hounds is a little risky. And when they fight on the ground, dogs are all around the bear. Dogs will run up, and another dog blocks that dog to retreat, and that's where a lot of it goes wrong. A dog will get in the way of another dog trying to. They're just running all over the place around this bear. So sometimes they get trapped by another dog, and it just takes one split second.
Yeah.
But I did it. I wasn't into killing the bear. We'd run them all training season in the summer. I'd be out 2 nights a week at least. Fall, you'd start running them during the day. When I got those dogs, I wasn't an obsessive bow hunter then, or I wasn't that bow hunter back then. But the guy that I went and talked to, that was a legend in West Virginia with bear hounds, he told me, he said, "You're going to quit deer hunting when you get those bear dogs." And I said, "No, I'm just going to deer hunt and bear hunt. That's what I'm going to do." He was right and I was wrong.
Do you still do that? You kind of say like as if it happened in the past. Is that something you still do, or
No,
no? Do you have any dogs still, or?
no, just my babies here in the house. We have 2 hounds tied up outside right now that we need to. Well, one of them's an older black and tan. These are dogs that were dropped, and I go down, check trail cameras where I hunt at, and I find these hounds. We bring them back, try to find homes for them. We have a really pretty English female here now that we need to find a home for. But as far as having bear hunting dogs, no, I don't. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It's a lot of expense. I mean, and dog food, or have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dogs, vet bills, just taking care of them. And, you know, yeah, it was a very, I don't know. I really respect the people that are lifers. This old timer that I started hunting with to finish my dogs when I first got them, I needed somebody that had finished dogs, because my dogs, I couldn't finish them the first year. They were just, I couldn't get them finished. I had bought 3 dogs for $800. He's like, "If you can get one bear dog out of that group of 3, you got to steal." And one of those hounds, and you asked me what I had, was a red tick. And when he died, his stomach turned right when he was in his prime. I wouldn't have sold him for $10,000. I don't even know if I would have 20,000 for him. He was such an amazing dog. He would rig on the box, strike a bear. I could get him down, turn him loose. He would make a 400-yard circle. It'd probably take like 20, 25 minutes, maybe even longer. If he didn't get a bear up and going or find that track, he would come back out in the road within 20, 30 minutes, come back to the truck and jump back up on the box on his own accord. I didn't have to go
That's nice.
and be ready to go. He was that kind of machine.
So a dog like that is the one where you say it felt like owning Secretariat.
I cried when he died. I ain't gonna lie.
I don't blame you.
That's all right.
I put his tracking collar on him, took the magnet out, put him in the ground, and yeah, it was sad.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's sad. They become part of your family.
Yeah.
R.I.P. That's cool though. That's some cool experiences though. It sounds like it's completely different than other types of hunting. Even more so than elk hunting is different than whitetail hunting. It's just a completely different facet of hunting.
Yeah, and I don't do. I always thought I'd get into mule deer, big mule deer bucks. Every time I see them, I'm like, they're amazing. They're just really masculine looking, beastly looking. And I don't know. The hobbies I have keep me busy enough. I don't need any additional layers to it.
I don't blame you. We always seem to get ourselves
Don't we all?
busy situations as we sit here on a Friday night chatting with you.
I don't know if you're going to ask this yet. You called my wife to ask her things that people might not know.
Yeah.
Everybody knows I have a side-by-side, but nobody knows that the reason I have this side-by-side is because I wrecked the other one 3 times.
Oh. Yeah, I guess that'll do it.
Is this side by side? Is it safer? Is that why you have this one?
Yeah, I think it's more stable. It's more capable on the rocks as far as rock climbing than I had a Talon. Now I have a Can-Am. It's safer on rock climbing. It's more capable. So it's more about the crawling effect with the way the belt drive is. With the Talon, it had some four-wheel drive technology, like a traction control thing that made it hard to rock climb. You'd have to goose the gas to get it to go up over things. And sometimes I'd end up on my top instead of up on the rock.
So just maybe you have a little more control with this
Yeah,
one. Is that
Can-Am's
okay?
pros and cons on both of them. I love a transmission, but the Can-Am is definitely more of a rock crawling machine. So
It's a cool looking machine.
yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of fun. I'm really I like it a lot. It's a
Awesome.
fun it's a fun passion hobby to have. So
Yeah, that's completely different than like this world that we're into. I mean, it's still kind of outdoorsy, right? But I'm sure it separates you from the pro one, the business and taxidermy, all that. It separates it into
yeah,
different kind of feeling you get doing all that.
yeah, getting out and getting a release is a therapeutic feeling. I backpacking into the wilderness, elk hunting. It's hard, but it's very therapeutic. It's just having the awareness to do it physically or being able to do it physically, capable of doing it. That feels good as you get older in life, still being able to stay healthy. Uh, but anything fun like that, yeah, it's got a lot of release factor as far as the day to day grind. But I never dread Mondays. That's what that's one feeling, and I never forget dreading Mondays in my life, and I never take anything for granted. So I remember when Pro-1 started getting busy, and I remember the days, and now it's like, I just think back and it's kind of surreal because it's doing really well.
Yeah, so I guess speaking of Pro One, maybe we can circle back. You said you've got some like different products coming out. Do you want to talk about those a little bit? Are those something that
Yeah, we
like
can talk about that. I've been working on it. It's something I've thought about. I mean, there are some other products on the market, but the taxidermy industry is a fairly small industry as far as customer base. And, you think about all the tens of thousands of hunters there are in every state. So people that want to tan their own flat hide deer or they want to tan their own life size elk, we're talking about flat hides. It's DIY, do it yourself tanning kits. And I'm working on. It's been an amazing project to work on. It took more time than what I thought, but I'm just gearing it towards getting ready for next year. But we're gonna have three separate kits that are for, like I already mentioned, a flat deer hide, an elk hide size skin or small cow, an average black bear, like a 35-pound skin. And we're going to have one for like bobcat, two raccoons, that sort of, or coyote size skin. There's going to be three kits. But most of the kits that are out there are most of them are alum based. It's like a pickle tan, do it all. And we're going to try to put some more bells and whistles with these and put a little bit of a parallel skin weight formula to them where people can, there'll be an actual degreasing, there'll be an actual pickle. We're going to use that liquid synthetic tan we have versus a powder tanning agent. So it's going to be a little bit more layers to it. It might sound a little bit more complicated to some people, but we're going to try to provide that instruction that where they can achieve that high end tan, and anybody can just by just by being able to read really good instruction. And yeah, I try to read things now, and being having the knowledge that I have, if I struggle to figure something out with tanning, then I'm like, you know what, there's an opportunity. So we're looking at a lot of things right now, even beyond those kits. But that's kind of like the new product thing we're going to do. And yeah, I'm thinking like maybe Cabela's, Midway, Shields, stuff like that. Yeah, I think about Amazon, but man, I just feel like it's going to tie up a lot of my elk hunting time. There goes my side by side time. It's like there's a certain value you can put to, yeah, money's money. time time is everything.
Yeah, you can make money, but can't make up time. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
so I try to be real careful and busy in my life up to the point that I just ruin a lot of the good things about it.
it sounds like it's something kind of comparable to like that orange bottle that you get at like, you know, Cabela's or whatever, or like not comparable, but like
Same
obviously a
market.
step above that. Yeah, same market. That's a good way to
Yeah,
put it. The direction of like, the people who are buying that.
same. Yeah, if somebody wants to tan, maybe it's a kid, but there's a lot of adults now. They just I get people that call me, oh, I want to tan this life size cow hide that I have, and I don't know anything about tanning. So I spent 2 hours on the phone here about a month ago with a couple guys they had a butcher shop in Indiana, I believe it was, 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. and 2 solid hours trying to teach them how to tan
Wow.
a bison skin.
Mm.
And
Mm.
funny thing was they offered to pay me for my time when we got done, and I'm like, no, that's good. And they didn't order a single product since then. I've been keeping up with it.
Oh man.
Yeah, I was like, they just used me.
Oh, you should have said, yeah, pay me for my time.
I'm gonna wait about another month. I'm gonna call them back from a different phone.
What I'm wondering is if they started fleshing that thing and they're like, screw this.
That's a good point.
You were very right.
Because I know I had to flesh a cowhide once, and I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I've had a few of those moments.
Yeah.
I bet that's what happened.
Probably. So we love that you support state associations so much, through PRO-1. And we were really excited when you announced that you were going to be donating 2 PRO-1 awards at the shows this year. So can you kind of say a little bit of why you kind of decided to do that?
Yeah, that was a pretty easy one. We started the PRO-1 award, and it's judge's choice, best mount. And it has, in my mind, and we had to clarify this, but in my mind, the best mount, if the best of show is on PRO-1, and in my mind, that's the PRO-1 winner because it's the best mount. But we had a few times when we had to clarify it to that level because, someone else, this one mount's winning all these awards, including best of show. And they're like, well, we'll give the next best one PRO-1. So we had to clarify it to that level. But then what happened was almost every time in a show, especially in the banquets I'm sitting in, when they called the PRO-1 winner, it would almost always end up being the best of show winner because, people do use PRO-1. I'm grateful for that. I'm very blessed. But I started feeling a little guilty because as I would walk the rooms, I would see that just about everyone was PRO-1. It's PRO-1 listed on their tags, and almost every time it was a Masters winner. So all these pro entries were, they're coming to the show and they're taking the time to say we use PRO-1. So I'm like, I need to separate this. So it's a costly thing to 42 shows, and I'm a small business by certain standards of other companies that are out there. So, but 2 awards for each show. Finally, this year, I could afford to do that. So I wanted to make sure that I wanted to give them the opportunity to win that award since I just didn't want them to feel like, hey, it's always a Masters entry. It's always a Masters entry. We appreciate those pro entries just as much.
Yeah, and it's a really super cool award. So I'm sure people are appreciative.
Hey, that new award you guys got out now, I watched. Well, I'm sitting at the table when Ashley won it this year. That thing is gorgeous.
Yeah, we're working on redesigning it that it's not as fragile as this last one was.
Yeah.
We didn't. I went to, like I said, I went to tell them like, be careful, the letters are wood, and then they cracked them. But we want to stick with that whole sheep theme because what do you think of when you think of a mountain is sheep?
Yeah, that was a great concept, and
Thanks.
and the name of it is it's nice. Nice job.
You should have seen some of our conversations with trying to pick names.
You did really good.
Well, thanks. And you said your award, obviously, people see the bison, the PRO-1 bison. It used to be like an eagle, is that right?
It was. We had breakage issues. I don't care what we did. Just we would foam that thing in, and just the shock effect, the vibration would make that thing snap too much. And I like that crystal eagle. It was pretty, but we just couldn't keep it together. So
I like the bison though. I'm a my vote's on that one. So.
I appreciate. I like we saw it. I mean, it's just something I ordered, but it's heavy. It's nice, and hey, it's just like it's turned out to be a great thing. So
Good.
I love seeing people win it, and it's fun.
Yeah.
I know. I can't wait to hopefully win one day too. I haven't won that one, but one day. So We want to really thank you for being such a great supporter of the podcast, Paul. You were the first person to reach out to us and want to be a part of what we're doing here, like through your sponsorship and stuff. So I had to throw that in there, and I wanted to thank you for that. We
Yeah.
wanted to thank you for that.
Thanks for allowing me.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. You guys, I admire what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. We admire what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shucks.
Yeah. So we're pretty even. So I think
Yeah.
that about wraps up our episode with you for today, Paul. And we want to thank you so much for talking with us. We really enjoyed learning more about you and, the PRO-1, how that all kind of worked out. And I know we both learned something a little extra about tanning and how that works. So I'm sure our listeners did as well. You had a lot of really great info. Is there anything that you would like to add before we wrap things up?
Like anything we didn't touch on, or
There's a lot to the tanning side of it. We could we could have a podcast on submersible tanning in itself. There's a lot of things on tanning.
we should do that.
Yeah, that might be a good topic instead of just learning about
exclusive.
you.
Yeah, it can get involved. It can get really involved, but I mean, I can't think of anything right off, I'm just very grateful for all my customers, humbly blessed. And we appreciate everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate you. I really appreciate your products and stuff too. Because like I say in the ad reads that we do, like I use your products personally. Heather does as well. So all that stuff, it's like we don't just talk about it. It's actually stuff that we use. So many other people use.
Yeah.
I actually just thought of a question and a half, maybe. You keep saying brush on tan, and then I've seen people online, and me myself, maybe I'm wondering, like, can you explain kind of simply, like, what is a brush on tan?
A brush on tan is nothing more than a tanning oil that has a tanning agent in it. And so the process is pickle the skin, neutralize the skin, and then put this tanning oil on it that also has a tanning agent. So we call it you brush oils on. So we call it a brush on tan because it's an oil that we brush on that has a tanning agent. So brush on tans are just oils that have tanning agents. Other oils would be like pure finishing oils that we use for like a submersible tan, like a tannery would do. You pickle the skin, and then you soak tan it, and then we put a finishing oil on afterwards. And it is strictly a finishing oil. Most brush on tans are finishing oils that have tanning agents. So you get the benefit of the oiling, lubrication part, but you also it's a shortcut. And the most important part is the pickled skin. But then we do the brush on tan, and it's probably that Pro Max, the brush on tan we have and that Pro Max are probably about equal sellers right now. And that was not, I never thought that Pro Max would reach that level, but it has. So, and it just says it out loud. It's all about simplicity.
Yeah, like I said, I like that Pro Max.
Complete formulas and not any thinking to it, really. Just you get great results from it.
Okay, so I guess brush on versus like maybe submersible, like that's the differences, right? So do you have like an explanation for maybe what like people call a spray tan?
Yeah, I mean, it's a preservative.
Is it like a dry preservative?
It's actually where you go to a place and you stand in front of a thing and they
you don't know.
You come out brown. You come out different brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of shortcuts. I mean, there's good shortcuts. There's lots of shortcuts. I could do so many more shortcuts that I don't offer that have value for people. I mean, you get really creative or half-ass with it, whatever you want to do. You can still get results. And the spray tans, I mean, there's a lot of like pickling type things that go on with vinegar. A pickled skin will last forever.
Is a spray tan, is it not necessarily like a traditional tan then? Is that because when people say they're spray tanning, it's not the traditional tanning method?
No, it's definitely not traditional. I don't want anyone to take this wrong when I say this, but it's probably the most primitive thing you could do beyond dry preservative.
Okay.
You rub dry powder on a hide and you mount it. I mean, that's as basic as it gets for preservation. Taxidermy tanning, by definition, is not what global leather would be called as tanned. No matter what claims any of us chemical suppliers say, like brush on tans, even the Pro Max tan, even the submersible tans, these skins will not pass what they call the shrink test. Whereas you can drop a piece of the skin in boiling water and it won't curl up. Taxidermy tanning is the bare minimal amount of tan to preserve the skin, but and provide preferred stretch and eliminate unpreferred shrinkage. So if we put enough tan into a skin to pass the shrink test, you wouldn't be able to get it on a mannequin.
Okay.
It would not have enough stretch to get on a mannequin.
It would be more like leather at that
Yeah,
point.
if it was
Like,
truly tanned by definition to pass the shrink test, you would not be able to get it on a mannequin. It would be more like dense leather. It would have flexibility and all of that, but you wouldn't have any elasticity. So taxidermy tanning is it's the bare minimal amount of tanning. I mean, these syntans that we use in this industry for submersible tanning, we're only using like 3%, and that's like 4 fluid ounces of a syntan will do a 6 pound deer cape, which is your average deer cape, pickled, drained. And these submersible tans, we're talking about soak tans where skin is pickled like a tannery would do, and then we soak it in a solution. And if people want to go look at that, we have a page on our website called Submersible Tannery Quality System. And it's the highest end tan that you could do. If I'm a tannery, that's probably the only tan I'm going to do because the hair set's unparalleled. I could take a submersible, a soaked tan skin, I could put it in a plastic bag and ship it to China, and it could get stuck in Arizona for 3 weeks in that bag. Nothing would happen. But it's the strongest tan out there. But by true definition, taxidermy tanning is just, like I said, it keeps the skin from rotting. It provides perfect stretch or preferred stretch, but it also eliminates excess shrinkage. And you cannot have a skin that will pass the boil test and get it on a mannequin. So we don't put a whole lot of tan into the skins. We pickle the skins, that lowers the pH to receive the tans. We put just enough tan and oil in them to accomplish those 3 features. And that's taxidermy tanning. If you wanted a really soft cowhide to throw across your back of your couch, the more tan you use, the more plush it will be. It's like pumping air into an air mattress. You can't really over tan when you're dealing with decorative skins. You can eliminate the stretch, but the more tan you put in them, the more plush they are, like a pillow top air mattress. So they're easier to break and they maintain a more suppleness. If we can load those skins up with 30% of a syntan, we can put heavier. We put a lot more any tanning agent. More tan we use, the softer they'll be.
versus you said like 6% for a wet tan.
Most mineral tans are like 6% of the skin weight, and that's like 1 ounce per pound of skin. And most syntans are half of that. Synthetic tans are very stringent tans. Oh, I wanted to make a really good point for this episode. You're talking about competition. You're talking about really good, high quality commercial work. Hair set. A lot of people think, oh, if the hair doesn't fall out, it's got to be a good tan. But things I'm passionate about are, the color or the lack of paint that you get to use on a whitetail. I keep saying whitetail, Heather. I'm sorry, but when we're talking about
that's okay.
We want non-yellowing because we can do softer, more natural finish work. So white leather, I'm a huge advocate of that. There's a lot of things we get to do that establish. It's not just about hair set. It's about what that skin looks like when it's dried. And if you can use a pink ear liner and not have to paint the ear and you still get a little natural tone, well, how fast does that make your commercial work for your customer? If you don't have to overpaint things to white them out because your eye dried too dark, or your nostrils dried with a yellow tint to them, or your ears are yellowing on the inside. It's all about white leather technology. we want really good products, we want really good application, but finish work has a lot to do with the quality of the tan. And eliminating that yellowing by having some really good white leather application, that's a huge plus when you're doing the finish work. It doesn't take as much paint to make it look soft. If that nose pad dries on a whitetail, a nice light gray color, well, you get to start out with a pretty nice base. And if it dries really black, or if those ears dry yellow, then you're having the, especially the ears, you got to white them out. You just got to put a lot more paint. Then they start looking painted. So the less paint we use to get that soft effect, that's got a lot to do with the tan. Just because the hair doesn't fall out doesn't necessarily mean all tans are created equal. So white leather technology, there's a lot of layers to tanning, and we could spend tons of time on different products and what they do and how you achieve certain results.
So that's where you said, was it your first world deer, your first best in world deer that had the yellowing, and you're like, something's got to change?
That started it all.
Okay, that's
That,
cool to know. So
that
then,
started it all. I just didn't like the look. I knew something was wrong, and I'm like, there's something better out there. And I got real curious. I was curious, and it became just once I found some of the places I could get the chemicals from, and I did so much studying back in those days. It was like it was crazy. I did feel like I went back to college, except I did it for like 8 years
Mm.
uh, of just research, research, research. I still sat down and learn things that it's so much fun. And it came from a lack of knowing, and that's a frustrating feeling. It's like uh, my side by side's a belt drive, and I don't know that much about, I'm not a mechanic by nature. So for me to learn things, I got to get on YouTube and I got to watch somebody do it. But it's good knowledge to have. But if I don't have that knowledge, I just don't have it. And it's a frustrating feeling. Getting one deer cape that would mess up and you didn't know why. You had this spot on it that the hair flipped up, or you had epidermal loss in the eyes, or you had all this yellowing down in the brisket of this hog, and or not pickling the pHs and things that just understanding how these tans and how these chemicals need to be put into these skins, and it's being able to make money off of it too. What are we here for?
yeah,
Hey,
right.
props to
There's
you for putting all that work in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot that goes into it. Like, I mean, you would probably agree that like there's just as much that, or maybe more, that goes into tanning as taxidermy alone, right?
I think so, yes. In
Yeah.
order, but most people, there's just, it's what you want to do. If you want to go as simple as possible, or you really want to learn you want to know everything there is to know. But there's all these shortcuts are really good shortcuts. But chemicals were meant to be administered into a skin through an aqueous transport. That means via water. That's the best quality. I get people call me all the time and they say, well, which tan is the best? And that's hard for me to say. It's kind of like depends on your criteria. If you want to go fast and get a lot of stretch, hey, brush on tan or the Pro Max, either one. But if you want to be a tannery or you want to do a life size cougar or somebody's bighorn sheep they paid $25,000 for, $15,000 for a cougar or something, we might want to consider a little bit more insurance on the hair set. So let me teach you how to do this submersible tan. And the neat thing is, I can teach you these shortcut formulas that you don't have to do all this skin. You can weigh the skin one time. You don't have to weigh the tan. You don't have to weigh the oil. It's all based on water volume. So it's really simple. You can, I could throw some stuff out there like bang, bang, bang right now. People go, that's just boring. It's like, you can tan any deer cape 3 gallons of water with 2 cups of salt, 4 fluid ounces of Syntan. And because it's 6 pound deer cape, 3 gallons of water, we can use a tablespoon of baking soda at the end for fixation on each feed, 1 hour apart. Get it to a 4.0. leave it set till the end of the day, drain it overnight, and oil it. There's your submersible tan, bang, bang.
And that's what your website with all of that info is.
Yeah.
Very handy to go on.
PRO-1 Performance Chemicals. There's a little shameless plug. Tanning instructions page. If you got any questions, call the technical support. I'll walk you right through it.
So a really quick thing, because Paul, like we have a lot of listeners that are from Australia and other parts of the world. And is your product able to be shipped to those countries? Do you know?
It is. We have, and I can't remember the name, and I apologize to this person if they watch this podcast, but we have a distributor in New Zealand, but it's and Australia right now.
Okay.
They're only carrying the hide paste at the moment.
Okay.
We can ship anywhere. We had a Japanese customer email us this past week. It just gets to be expensive. We can get it there. If you can pay for it, we'll ship it to you. We can ship anywhere. It's really expensive to send something through parcel post to another country.
One, I just know they don't have a lot of high quality stuff in some of these other countries, and I'm not really sure why. I know they have to it's a lot harder for them almost like to do taxidermy, like their forms, they're not as easily accessible. So, maybe if they can charge enough to make it worthwhile, having a good tan would probably help them out.
It would. And I don't know what the obstacles are. We had a gentleman that came in, visited here a few weeks ago from Africa. They've just recently, they're one of the most recognized outfitters there. And now they got this huge tannery. And they're thinking about branching out and I guess providing tannery services. So he came and visited, and I'm hoping we get that going.
Yeah.
Every new customer's that much more.
Yeah. So just speaking of customers and stuff, so where can people find PRO-1? Do you want to plug that real quick?
Yeah. I mean, PRO-1performancechemicals.com. We have an online store this year, really user friendly. And unless you're from Canada or Hawaii or somewhere, it's just lower 48 only, can order off the store. Or you can call the 681 number that's listed on our website and just a call-in order.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think that about wraps it up. And so, Paul, I want to thank you so much for being here. This was a great episode. I can't wait for it to come out and for everyone to hear about this stuff. So, yeah, thank you again.
My pleasure. Appreciated it.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you so much. And we would also like to thank you for listening to our podcast, Wildverse. We hope you enjoyed learning more about the man behind PRO-1. If you would like to stay up to date on new podcast releases, you can follow us on Facebook at Wildverse Taxidermy Podcast and Instagram at Wildverse Podcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wildverse Podcast, to see when new videos come out. Or you can leave us some love on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen by leaving us a review. And don't forget, you need to order your PRO-1 hide paste online now. You're probably almost out.
Yep.
I know a guy.
Yeah, we know a guy. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.